Welcome, Pod.
And welcome back into TCM Pod. Chris Mathis back here with Spencer Mathis as we have the official first week of preseason. That was a cool
A
combination
new
right there.
word.
First official. Yeah, I like that one. First official preseason game out of the way in the NFL, and a lot to get into regarding the quarterbacks from across the National Football League, including Aaron Rodgers and his new weapon in New York as the Jets get set for what could be a big season based upon the play of one particular position. We'll get into that here momentarily. Also, the Buccaneer quarterback competition is potentially ongoing. I feel as if it's over with, but we'll talk more about that here regarding Baker Mayfield, Kyle Trask, 2 in this episode of the podcast. Also, Hard Knocks, episode 2. My biggest takeaway, I know Spencer has watched one episode of that. I won't give away too much. So if you guys have not seen Hard Knocks, I'm not going to spoil much. It's something that you guys have been able to see so far. If you're anywhere on social media and do not live underneath the rock. But with that being said, the National Football League kicks off in just a few weeks. I know that we just are amped up for that. I know that all this training camp discussion, all the chatter, all the joint practices across the NFL have been exciting. But for me, to see the quarterbacks that are rookies get named starting quarterbacks this week to take over and lead their teams was awesome. Obviously, a lot of question marks. I took to social media yesterday regarding Anthony Richardson, 4th overall draft pick from the Florida Gators, being named the starting quarterback over Gardner Minshew there in Indianapolis. That's the first starter named out of all the rookies. Bryce Young is starter. CJ Stroud out there in Houston is starting quarterback too. But for me, I'm obviously excited to see how this all pans out. I do think that the Colts made a mistake by naming Anthony Richardson their week 1 starting quarterback. It's a little too early for a guy that didn't have many reps in college ball last year. I know he played off last year, but he's not like some 3-year star. I mean, last year he was even a little bit shaky after a couple of games. So Anthony Richardson thrown right into the fire there in Indianapolis over a veteran quarterback in Gardner Minshew, which shocks me with a team that doesn't have much expectation to have a big year there with the Colts. The question marks surrounding Jonathan Taylor, Jim Irsay, the owner. I mean, there's so many question marks, Spence. But talk about the quarterback situation with the rookies, the starting rookies, and, were you shocked or do you feel like it was the right call for the Colts to go ahead and name Anthony Richardson their week 1 starting quarterback over a veteran that's been there, done that several times at several different stops?
Yeah, I mean, they've only played in one preseason game so far. He didn't look great in that preseason game. I really didn't get to see the game altogether, though. Saw the stat line, saw some of his errant passes, and then didn't really get to see anything of Gardner Minshew in that game. Nobody really tweeted anything about him. But, I mean, at this point, I think right now you can't. That's a situation where you do not name your starting quarterback yet. Like right now, it should be a quarterback battle between these two guys because Minshew has had some success in the NFL. And Richardson barely scraped the barrel of having success in college football. So for the Indianapolis Colts to name their starting quarterback before the Tampa Bay Buccaneers name their starting quarterback, I think is something to keep an eye on throughout the season, of course, just because Richardson, like you said, I don't think he's ready yet. I mean, maybe if you put together 3 really good preseason games, he could be ready. Of course, they got, I think it's 2 weeks now in between the week 3 preseason game and the first week of the NFL season. But in my opinion, I don't think Richardson's ready either. So I agree with you there. The Bryce Young situation, though, with him being the starting quarterback over Andy Dalton, I think we've really seen all of Andy Dalton that you really can. I mean, you saw him last year in New Orleans. He's just a guy that continues to get jobs. Yeah, I mean, he's not a starting caliber quarterback at the moment. Neither is Gardner Minshew. But you would think with Richardson, like you said, I mean, probably after the bye week, you finally sit Minshew and you start Richardson. Instead, you're doing the opposite here, in which you might really hurt the confidence of a young quarterback and Anthony Richardson. With Bryce Young, I get the move there. Carolina's trying to build that franchise up right now. They've got the defense ready. Might as well start with the offense, which could be ready in about 2 or 3 years. So Young makes sense. And then the last one was CJ Stroud and Davis Mills. I think that one's also one that should not have been named yet, in my opinion, just because CJ Stroud didn't look good in his first preseason game. That was all over the internet. And Davis Mills has been a quarterback that's played good. And the thing is, though, with CJ Stroud, I think he's more of a pro-ready quarterback than Anthony Richardson. So out of these 3, I think that it goes in terms of confidence and who I think should be starters. I think Bryce Young should, of course, be the starter. I think there's a case to be made for CJ Stroud. But for Anthony Richardson, I don't see any case because they don't have Jonathan Taylor. I mean, they're not a team that's going to be able to be good this year, regardless of who quarterback is, unless their guy makes no mistakes because their defense is all right. Their offense is nothing without Jonathan Taylor, though. So we'll see how that goes throughout this season. But Like I said, I just don't think that Richardson is ready, like exactly what you said as well. And CJ Stroud's kind of borderline. Of course, he was a very good quarterback at Ohio State, though. I mean, played against Georgia very well, who was the eventual national champions last season until Marvin Harrison Jr. got hurt. And with the Texans, I can't really think of a very good receiver that they have at the moment, so that could be a thing to look out for. But I think that's a guy that could be thrown into the fire early on.
Yeah, and you talk about, of course, the Colts situation, star running back Jonathan Taylor. He was the big discussion in last week's episode, and, running backs and wanting to get paid, and he waited too late to speak up and did it at just the wrong time. With that being said, Jonathan Taylor was talked about today by Colts GM Chris Ballard, who says that they need Jonathan Taylor 100% healthy before he returns to the field. So it's almost like a scapegoat, like, hey, we're upset that you're not out there. However, this is a good way for us to use an excuse, and that's to say, hey, you're not at 100%. Let's let you get there before you touch the field. So they're trying to cover up this Taylor situation as much as they can while also having to worry about the owner, Jim Irsay, who honestly is a clown.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what the direction for the Indianapolis Colts is or what they're kind of expecting in this season. And if it's anything like Peyton Manning's rookie season, which a great quarterback in college football with the Tennessee Volunteers versus Anthony Richardson with the Florida Gators. And they were terrible last season. He wasn't great either until the last 4 games, but those are such big differences in the two careers, even in college. And looking at the NFL, I don't think Anthony Richardson is ever going to be a guy like Peyton Manning is, but in terms of that, Jim Irsay's been around the block. I think that's why he's starting Anthony Richardson. I think I made this point before, is that Manning broke the record in 1998 with interceptions by a rookie quarterback, and he's not afraid to have Anthony Richardson go out there and do the exact same thing if that's how he wants to progress his quarterbacks. But since Peyton Manning, you've had Andrew Luck, who was out of the league early on as well. Of course, he had to be started because he was the best quarterback prospect of all time. And then since then, really nothing. So you've had Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan. Does he know a lot about quarterbacks, and why does this GM have this much control over the Colts in the first place, at least in terms of the team? He's the owner, actually. So why does Irsay, the owner, have so much control over who his team starts? I think that's another point to be made. But either way, Anthony Richardson's going to be the week 1 starter unless there's an injury or anything that goes on with him, and I think that's a bad decision for the Colts.
Yeah, and I was looking at the Colts schedule, and the thing is, they start off the year against a couple of squads that you think, okay, they have a shot to win. And they start off with the Jacksonville Jaguars, followed by the Houston Texans. So then they'll go week 3 at Baltimore. So Richardson, he's gonna have his hands full right off the jump, right out of the gate with the Colts. Then he has the Rams, Aaron Donald, week 4. Week 5, it lets up a little bit, maybe with the Tennessee Titans. But in all reality, looking at their schedule, they have a bye week, week 11. If you didn't feel like he was ready by week 5 or 6, and you started Gardner Minshew, you could have waited and let it roll out to week 10, week 9, or week 11, and then name Anthony Richardson your starting quarterback heading to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers week 12. So I just don't like the way that they handled that. I think that now you put so much pressure. And yes, of course, he's a highly touted athlete, but he's not a highly touted quarterback. He's not. He really took a leap in terms of his draft profile following his combine production and following his size, his metrics. If you take that away, this guy, in all reality, based on his play last year in college, might have been a 3rd or 4th round pick at best, in my opinion. Then he goes to the combine, he shows out, and then it's like, hey, this guy could be a 1st round draft pick. And I'm like, okay, maybe like a 32, 31. Then it's like, no, this guy, his size, his metrics, his speed, he's going to be a top 10. I'm like, there's no way he's top 10. He's going to be top 5. Boom, top 4 to the Colts. And so you're having a guy who is not polished, wasn't even polished with the SEC, which, of course, is the toughest, most difficult conference in all of college football. But that does not stack up to the NFL whatsoever. And now you're going to take a guy that was inconsistent throwing the ball, and he has a cannon. He can throw the ball deep downfield with accuracy. But aside from that, I don't think that there's much there yet. There's something there to work with. You can teach him these mechanics. You can help adjust his mechanics. He's still green in terms of grass time. But that's why you give him these practice reps to start off the year and let Minshew lose his job. I think that would have been the best route to go about this business, because now if he goes out there and looks terrible week 1, even a Colts fan is going to say, okay, it's week 1. Week 2, okay. Week 3. But week 5 or 6, if he's not really looking good or flashy, they're starting to freak out. And at that point, you're making him question his confidence. And then who knows? I think Minshew is good enough that if Anthony Richardson really struggled so bad that you would feel okay with using kind of a stopgap quarterback in Minshew and let him ride out the rest of the year. And of course, Richardson would be the guy next year, but I feel like you're just throwing this guy into the fire way too early before you really need to.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing with the Colts is that they're kind of on the downtrend in terms of popularity. So why not throw out a rookie quarterback? I mean, obviously they probably overdrafted him at number 4, probably could have traded down for him, but then again, the buzz around him at the draft was so big, and now Anthony Richardson is going to be the starting quarterback. And another thing that kind of plays into this is, like I just said, the Colts are trying to get a little bit more popularity, at least in terms of social media, tweets about them. Of course, it's a money making business. Of course, the NFL is in. The thing with Anthony Richardson is there's always going to be hope with him. At least right now, it's kind of looking like a Jameis Winston on crack right now in terms of his athletic ability. Except for he wasn't great in college either, but Jameis Winston was. So it's going to be a tough start for Anthony Richardson regardless of what happens. But I think they're willing to throw him out there because he's a guy that can run and he's going to make flashy plays regardless because he's got a rocket arm as well. It just comes down to if he can make the easy passes, because from what I've seen, that seems to be the thing. His decision making isn't great, and his accuracy short is just oddly terrible.
Yeah, and I saw his interception. And Nick Wise of DAE, of course, my co-host on Saturdays with the Wise and Mathis show on the iHeartRadio app, which I'm repping the shirt. Finally, after a year, got a really cool black polo. I'm here in the iHeartRadio studios at Feather Sound. And yeah, I really like it. Did you say you like it, Spence?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off. But yeah, I like it as well. But he also said, watch that interception with Anthony Richardson from last week's game. Look at his footwork. And it was awful. It was awful. And of course, it was one play. However, it was one play that you see his bad footwork, and it led to an interception. So I just think there's so much to work on. And with this Colts team, if Jonathan Taylor's not there, they're in big trouble in my mind regarding, of course, Anthony Richardson and his development early on. So maybe they are playing for next year. Maybe they're already looking ahead and just want him to get reps this year, maybe win 5 games at most, maybe 6. And then they have a top 10 pick again for next year, and they already know what they have in Richardson. They're just building on to what they have in their quarterback, who was taken 4th overall.
Yeah, Colts not in win-now mode. The Texans not in win-now mode. And Andy Dalton's not going to pick up any more wins than a rookie Bryce Young's going to either way, and he was the 1st overall pick. So the starting quarterbacks of these rookies make sense in terms of trying to build these guys' the confidence inside the NFL, maybe even throw them directly into the fire, like what we're seeing with Anthony Richardson, and probably the same case with the Houston Texans and CJ Stroud. But I see why you would want to start these guys in terms of popularity, in terms of building for the future, because none of these teams, aside from the Carolina Panthers, really have even a shot at making the playoffs. And even Carolina's a tough shot because Bryce Young's going to have to play really good with no DJ Moore, a pretty shaky receiving core, a decent tight end, and usually a really good run game. I mean, we even saw that last year without Christian McCaffrey with their new coach. But I mean, it's gonna be tough. And also, what we're forgetting is that the Texans have a new head coach as well. So a lot of these guys are coming in under completely new regimes that have no connection to the previous regime, aside from the owners. I mean, new GMs, new head coaches with some of these teams that are starting rookie quarterbacks. And we'll see exactly how this goes. I can't remember who the Carolina Panthers head coach is heading into this season, but I know at least 2 of those teams have new ones. So, I mean, it's really just a complete new regime, and I think that's something that a lot of the media is kind of forgetting about in terms of why they're starting these rookie quarterbacks. Because do you really want to go back your first year as a head coach and remember that you started Andy Dalton over the 1st overall pick, or Davis Mills over a top 5 pick, or even Gardner Minshew over the number 4 overall pick in Anthony Richardson? So I understand where these guys are coming from, and I mean, I hope all goes well for him. I mean, even Bryce Young with the Carolina Panthers, I wouldn't mind seeing a ton of success from him either. So we'll see how this goes down the season. But again, there's things to be said about both decisions in terms of starting a veteran quarterback or starting a rookie quarterback. But me personally, even if I'm a new head coach, I would like to start a more seasoned veteran the first couple of weeks until your guy learns the playbook, learns how to throw in your offense, and along with a ton of other things that the Colts don't have and the Texans don't have.
Yeah, this might be a bad analogy, but it's almost like throwing out, let's say, a junior varsity quarterback who maybe has played 2 games at JV level, and you have to throw him out there for the varsity game on Friday night. And he just goes out there. It's a total different ball game. The speed is different. He doesn't have the chemistry with all these receivers yet. He hasn't really developed on how to necessarily make certain checkdowns or reads like he should. Just the IQ is a little bit underdeveloped. That's what they have, I feel like, when you throw out a rookie quarterback. That isn't a game changer, like right off the get-go, as far as who was supposed to be the next big thing. Andrew Luck, a prime example of that. Yeah, I would start him all day long. So on the flip side, I just saw a report of Brock Purdy out in San Francisco. He's thrown 10 interceptions in training camp so far, had 2 more interceptions in practice on Wednesday with another potential interception dropped, that via a report from Dov Kleiman on Twitter. So, there's been a lot of talk surrounding interceptions in training camps this year, and I've put 2 and 2 together. It happens when there's a quarterback competition ongoing like there is one here in Tampa Bay. We'll talk more about that here in just a moment. But do you feel like it's a big deal, with these interception numbers from Brock Purdy coming off of a surgery? Trey Lance is there, which it feels like his opportunity is diminishing. Yeah. And, of course, Sam Darnold there as well.
Yeah, I mean, turnovers in a Shanahan offense is not going to go. And I've seen a lot of things about Brock Purdy last season, having some of them, I think, through those 8 or 9 weeks that he started in the regular season, he had the most dropped interceptions last year. So it's a thing where he makes some mistakes and these guys just can't catch the ball. And he's not a guy that's like a generational talent, of course. So I think we're forgetting that this is a lot of mania that happened last season, kind of like Gardner Minshew mania back in the day. Brock Purdy's along the same line of a quarterback. And this guy's not going to be a starting quarterback in the league for very much longer, if I had to guess. So the thing with Brock Purdy is he reminds me kind of of Drew Lock with the Broncos a couple of years ago. And I think interceptions are a big thing that plays along with this. And one thing that I always go back to whenever I look at Trey Lance being the 49ers quarterback is, what if the San Francisco 49ers would have traded up to draft Mac Jones instead, a guy that doesn't turn the ball over and is good at making the checkdowns?
Yeah, with that defense and with the rushing attack and the weapons that he has, they probably would have won it all last year. Now, of course, an injury, Brock Purdy didn't suffer the injury. Maybe it's a different story no matter what. But continuing with the quarterback conversation here, I've been watching HBO's Hard Knocks because your guy Aaron Rodgers has been on there, and he's starting to become a likable guy, and I kind of hate that because I did want to like the guy, but he's so chill this season. I don't know if it's a fresh look with the Jets or if this is how he was.
This has been.
And maybe that story, and you're a diehard Rodgers fan from his time with Pat McAfee show. But I did just get your alert that if the computer dies, that you'll join back here on your phone. So if he does disappear, he'll hop right back on, and I'll continue with the conversation.
I've already got it on.
TCM Pod. He's all ready to go. If you guys do not watch, you can watch this podcast on Spotify and YouTube. It's a great way to interact with us and to watch. If not, we love you listening on the iHeartRadio app and Apple Podcasts too. But when we're talking about Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, they added a new weapon this week in Dalvin Cook. So now they have Dalvin Cook, Breece Hall, so many other guys that are going to be able to be a big part of this. And I think that whenever you talk about this team and the Jets, that we just made a clean switch right there. You got me?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That's cool. And it sounds crazy because that audio sounds better now. So, it's kind of weird. But anyway, so you talk about the addition of Dalvin Cook, star running back who is waiting for an opportunity, has officially joined the New York Jets. He's going to try to get healthy and be back for, I believe, week 1. I might be wrong on that regard. But how much do you feel this helps out the Jets in regards to having their offense that they have to work with this year, in addition to Aaron Rodgers there in that color of green? Because we've seen Rodgers have success in a different green. Now he's swapped over on the East Coast, and he's with the New York Jets.
Yeah, I think with the way that the NFL is trending towards 2 backs, I mean, Breece Hall is already a starting caliber running back. We saw that last year before he tore his ACL. Then now you've got Dalvin Cook in the building. And those are 2 guys that run pretty differently in terms of Breece Hall's ability to break tackles, and Dalvin Cook with probably one of the best elusivenesses in the game in terms of him being able to miss tackles or make people miss tackles and stuff like that. So I think it's good to have a 1-2 punch, and especially if it's the guy the caliber of Dalvin Cook. Of course, anything's better than I think if you would have signed Ezekiel Elliott, which probably would have been the other option for them. Instead, they get Dalvin Cook. They've got a 2-headed monster in the backfield now. And if you think back to how Rodgers' success has happened over the last couple of years, is having 2 running backs. I mean, Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams a couple of years ago. And then, of course, last year, even in Green Bay, they also had 2 running backs that were very, very different in their style of play. So, of course, this is not a power running back and an elusive running back completely, but it is kind of trending that way in terms of Breece Hall's. I think he's like 6'1". Dalvin Cook's like 5'9", 5'10". So 2 different running backs, and one's going to be used for first and second down. The other one's going to be used for third down, and they're always going to have a very good running back with fresh legs. And I think that's going to play a big part in their success especially coming into the end of December in January, and even if they make it to the Super Bowl in February, I think you have to have two running backs now of a pretty good caliber. They don't have to be great, but I think they have two really good running backs.
So talking about the Jets, and of course they're on HBO's Hard Knocks this year. It's been fun to keep up with that. I know that episode 2 just released this week, and that was entertaining. So I know not everybody, including Spence, has not seen episode 2. However, the biggest takeaway, without giving away too much, is the inconsistency of the offensive line with the Jets. And Aaron Rodgers was frustrated with the play at one point during the joint practices last week with the Carolina Panthers, and of course their preseason action with the offensive line against the Jets, and Rodgers was not in that game against the Carolina Panthers. However, the offensive line's inconsistencies was still relevant whenever Zach Wilson was in. And so the Buccaneers here in Tampa Bay, they actually made a trip up to the Jets on Wednesday, and they playing on a joint practice with the Jets there in New Jersey. And so I saw reports come out of Jersey this morning that the Jets drive. Here's an example of a 10-play period for the Jets offense. The Bucs sacked Aaron Rodgers on 3 of his 7 dropbacks. The Bucs had 6 obvious sacks in team drills today, which is not good. It doesn't matter who's out there. And then to elaborate and add on to that, with that offensive line, there was one run, a series of plays in which Aaron Rodgers, here's the back-to-back plays, sack, quick completion to Garrett Wilson, quick completion to Allen Lazard, quick completion to CJ Uzoma, a sack, and another sack by the Bucs defense. So the offensive line a bit shaky there when it comes to the Jets. And obviously I think that's a pretty big deal, but fortunately they've got weapons surrounding Aaron Rodgers, and he does get rid of the ball quick. But is this the difference between the team making a playoff run and a team being a true Super Bowl contender, that offensive line play up front?
Yeah, I mean, you go back to the Rams in 2021, and this is the thing that you're always going to continue to go back to. Ever since Brady started the trend of veteran quarterbacks going to a team that's not a playoff contender, or at least not a team that you think is going to win it all, then going and winning it all. I mean, 2 years ago it was the Buccaneers, or 3 years ago it was the Buccaneers. 2 years ago it was the Rams. Last year, a couple of teams tried it. This year, we're seeing 2 more teams try it in the New Orleans Saints and the New York Jets. But with the Jets, I mean, a bad offensive line is something that may have been overlooked in all of this. Of course, Rodgers can get the ball out quickly, but with that 30-something million, I mean, that may be something that they're going to have to sign before the season even begins, or maybe after a couple of weeks of trial before their bye week. But an offensive line is so important, even going back to a more immobile quarterback in Tom Brady. But at this point, I mean, even Aaron Rodgers can't really move out of the pocket like he used to. But Tom Brady in 2020 had such a good offensive line, and I mean, they all got paid a year or two afterwards. If you think of the left tackle for the Buccaneers at the time was Tristan Wirfs, or Donovan Smith. He just got signed by the Kansas City Chiefs. The left guard was Alex Kapp. He got signed a couple of years later by the Bengals for one of the most expensive guard contracts of all time. Jensen was paid to play with Brady. That was an important sign. The right guard was always a little bit shaky in Tampa, but right tackle, I mean, his rookie season, that's Tristan Wirfs in the year the Buccaneers won the Super Bowl. And that's an incredible offensive line. And looking over at the Jets offensive line, you have maybe 1 or 2 guys that would be considered very good, or one that's considered very good. And then the rest, I think you probably have maybe two starters on most NFL teams in terms of your guard situation there in New York. Even the right tackle is not great there as well. So it's important to have a good offensive line, and they just signed a new running back, so they're looking to run the football, of course. And the stuff that's coming out of camp, I haven't seen the second Hard Knocks episode yet, but the stuff that's coming out of camp about the New York Jets offensive line is very, very. I think it's something to definitely keep an eye on. Just, I mean, we'll see this Saturday or Friday whenever the Bucs play them in the preseason game. If that transfers to game speed, of course, practice is a little bit different. But if this continues to be the trend heading towards the end of preseason, which, I mean, we only have 2 more games left in preseason for each and every team. If they head into week 1 with these same concerns and problems, that's not a good thing for the New York Jets, because you have to have a good offensive line in this day and age, and especially if you have a guy that can't move around in the pocket very well at this point in Rodgers, who's 38 or 39 years old. I think it's maybe a big issue heading down the stretch of the season, and maybe even at the beginning of the year, before we even really know what the Jets are trying to do offensively. Of course, they've got basically the same coaching staff. Robert Saleh finally has a quarterback that he loves, is what he said on Hard Knocks. But we'll see how this goes. I mean, last year Zach Wilson didn't look great in New York, but maybe it was because he was scrambling for his life with the offensive line. And now that I'm thinking back at it, a lot of his terrible plays were him having to evade 4 or 5 sacks and throwing interceptions. So offensive line is important. It's probably the most important thing for a quarterback aside from, I mean, I think it's even more important than the receiving core. You have to have probably one good receiver. The Jets have that. But aside from that, the offensive line is so important. And for the Jets to have this many issues this early on, and this being like the news out of New York right now, I think that's terrible for them. And a lot of the money that they're going to be spending probably near the bye week is going to be going to at least a new tackle.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And there's an instance in Hard Knocks yesterday where Coach Robert Saleh talks about the offensive line and the identity of the team. And he's like, last year we were a 7-10 team, I believe, is what he said, with a great defense and a bad offensive line. And he's like, we're not going to effing be that this year. We need to change the narrative, change the identity of this team. And it all starts with you guys up front. So there's a lot of pressure on that offensive line as it is. And it's shown throughout Hard Knocks. It's shown on the field too, because Rodgers talking them up, trying to get in their ears. And obviously it's New York media too. So you praise them when they do great. You give extra praise, but when they struggle, they really get it. So media that hasn't been as pressed, I would say, over the last, Saturday's game, nearly a week now. Here is the Tampa Bay media regarding the quarterback conversation and competition here with the Buccaneers and Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield. And on Friday night, the Bucs took on the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 1 of the preseason. And they started Baker Mayfield for a quarter and some change. And then Kyle Trask came into the ball game. And we got to see both quarterbacks with the same group of personnel, same offensive line. Now, 2 starters were on that offensive line, and Luke Gedeke and the rookie Cody Malk on the right side. Aside from that, the other 3 guys are kind of questionable regarding if they're solidified starters or not. But both quarterbacks had the same guys to work with. The Bucs did rest 19 players, 16 of which were starters in that preseason game last week, in comparison to the Steelers resting 0 players. So I don't know if I agreed with that take and that approach by Todd Bowles, but the overall performances of the Buccaneer quarterbacks looked like this, as we saw Baker Mayfield go 8 of 9, 63 yards, and a touchdown pass in the back of the end zone, this courtesy of J and Z Show. And then Kyle Trask went 6 of 10, 99 yards, and a pick in that game. So with that being said, I felt like coming into this preseason game last week, Kyle Trask was making noise. I think that if you're watching on the screen right now, the competition was close. Baker's still in the lead. I'm thinking maybe 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters away from each other. But then after the performance from Baker Mayfield doing what was expected and Kyle Trask disappointing us, doing the opposite of what he did in training camp, which was not turn the ball over, then get sacked 3 times. And I know it was not all his fault, but just for the optics in your eyes, you see Baker Mayfield's trajectory of being the starter just shoot up a lot. And at this point, I think that the Buccaneers quarterback competition is over with. Now, I do believe and I do know that Kyle Trask will start week 2 of the preseason against the Jets this weekend on Saturday. However, no matter what he does, I don't think there's any chance that he will become the starting quarterback week 1 for the Buccaneers whatsoever. I think the competition is now officially over with. Kyle Trask did give Baker Mayfield a run for his money. I was impressed with Trask. I think he did a much better job than I expected. However, on the flip side, he's a second-round draft pick, and I'm thinking, man, they wasted a draft pick. Do you feel like this quarterback competition is now over with? And if so, why? If not, why do you feel like Kyle Trask still has a shot?
Yeah, I mean, there was a report in Tampa coming out in the social media platforms and everything that the quarterback competition wasn't really a thing. And Baker Mayfield went out there. I think he proved himself. I mean, of course, they could have already decided as coaches who they want to be the starting quarterback in week 1. But I think the fans are also a big part of it, because if everybody hates Baker Mayfield in terms of Tampa Bay fans, I don't think that the front office is going to be willing to start a guy like Baker Mayfield who's got moxie, but he makes a ton of mistakes. And for him to go out there in week 1 and look good, I think was important. I don't think it's truly over the quarterback competition, because what if Baker Mayfield goes out there next week with the backups and throws like 2 or 3 interceptions and just sucks it up, and then Kyle Trask gets more time with the starters, or at least some of the starters that get to play, and he does great. I mean, the thing with the quarterback competition is that each week the narrative is going to completely change all the way up until the end of week 3. I think after the 3rd preseason game, we're going to know exactly who is going to be the starting quarterback, because both of the players are going to get reps with some starters like Mike Evans, and hopefully Chris Godwin will get to play in the game. Of course, the injury news out of Tampa Bay today was that Russell Gage is out for season, which is big for them. But they've got a couple of guys that are willing to step up here with Trey Palmer, who looks really good. But I think this week is very important for this quarterback battle. If Trask goes out there and plays bad as the starter, that's the end for him. Of course, I think right now, like you said, it's probably 80-20 in terms of Baker Mayfield getting the start over Kyle Trask, but I think Trask could really bring it in within like 35-65 if he goes out there and has a good week, and Baker Mayfield does the complete opposite. So I think it's near over if Mayfield has another good game, but if he doesn't, he makes some turnovers, kind of like what we saw with Trask. People are going to look back at, I'd say, 2 weeks ago, whenever Baker Mayfield was making all the mistakes in practice, and everybody was talking about that. So, I mean, it's going to go back and forth until at least week 3, unless Kyle Trask goes out there and lays an egg this Saturday night versus the Jets.
I think that no matter what happens on Saturday night against the Jets, I think early next week after the game, they name Baker Mayfield the starting quarterback, and then maybe Baker gets all the reps with the ones for a little bit in the third preseason game, or they don't play him at all. But I think that they have to name their starting quarterback heading into week 3 of the preseason. That way they do have that continuity of Baker or Trask if he somehow surprises me and proves me wrong, which will not happen. It will not happen. Is the starter week 3. They have to have reps with Baker and, of course, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rachaad White, because all of those guys, they did not play last week in that preseason game. So I think the Buccaneers will make their announcement of their quarterback heading into that third preseason game. And I just don't see any way that Todd Bowles, after whatever happens against the Jets this weekend, says, hey, Kyle, you're the guy. I just don't foresee that happening.
Yeah, and again, this is going to be tough this week because the Jets are on Hard Knocks, and this is week 2 of the preseason. Week 1, I didn't see very much of, but I saw a couple of good plays from Zach Wilson that were in there, and I think it's time that we see Aaron Rodgers out there. And with Rodgers coming out there, I think we're also going to see some more starters on defense, and this is going to be the big test for Kyle Trask, in my opinion. He's going to be going up against Sauce Gardner in a game setting, a good defensive pass rush with the New York Jets. I mean, a very good, sound defense. Anytime Robert Saleh is your coach or defensive coordinator, you're going to have a good defense. I mean, he was with the 49ers for a long time. He was very good there. So it's going to be the trial for Kyle Trask. Hopefully he's getting ready right now as we speak. But either way, like you said, I think right now Baker Mayfield's way ahead of Trask. But if he goes out there and impresses against maybe, let's say, the Jets start 10 of 11 starters on defense, and he really goes out there and dices them up, I think that this could be a completely different narrative next week in terms of Kyle Trask being dead in this quarterback competition.
Again, this is TCM Pod, the Chris Mathis podcast. Chris Mathis, Spencer Mathis Squad that you guys have checked us out. Follow us on social media at TCM_pod, at L Savage Spence, at the Chris Mathis. And the biggest topic of the podcast we save for last. I don't know if Spencer's ready to talk about this on air, but I'm going to bring it up. I have to do it. I hope that you guys are buckled in wherever you are right now. I'm sure that Spencer's a little bit nervous as I pop this question off, but people want to know, how's Madden NFL 2024?
I think Madden has given us a new insight on who's going to be the Buccaneers starting center, because I was looking at Ultimate Team yesterday and I look up Ryan Jensen. I'm thinking, hey, he's been an elite for the last couple of years. Is he an elite? Guess who pops up when I look up Buccaneers center elite on Ultimate Team?
No clue.
Robert Hainsey, the backup center.
Really?
So it's looking like Madden has the inside track on who's going to be the Buccaneers center. Of course, the game right now is a complete money grab. If you're not spending money, your team is absolute ass. If I can say that here on this YouTube channel. But aside from that, I mean, the game looks good so far. They've had a ton of issues with the launch, but I got past it after the 2-hour wait. It was okay because my game was still downloading. But if I was waiting there and took off work like a lot of guys did, and the game doesn't come out until 10:30 or 11 p.m., I think I would have been even more pressed than I was. But so far, so good with Madden. But I think that was a little bit of a shocker, because I've heard what T-Kraz on your radio show on 620 has been saying about Ryan Jensen. The last time I was listening, I think it was not even a week ago, he said it may be time to bring out the R word for Ryan Jensen, which is retirement. And it comes down to how he treated his injury. Either his personal doctors were not very keen on him coming back the next season, or maybe he just thought he could get over it. But either way, it looks like he waited too long for surgery. And with his age, I mean, he was with the Ravens for so long. He's been with the Bucs now. This is year 4 for him with Tampa Bay. I mean, I don't know. That could actually be the case with Ryan Jensen, and Madden has the inside track. That's all I wanted to say with Robert Hainsey. But regardless, let's just say that Robert Hainsey should not be an elite in Madden. I'm not sure what they were watching in the first place for that to even be the answer there.
He's put on a lot of weight, man. Robert Hainsey is beefed up. We'll see. And I think that he knew that coming into the season, that Jensen was not going to be ready to go. Hey, let me beef up. Let me get ready. I'll be the guy. I mean, Todd Bowles said earlier this week during a press conference that he's not well right now, talking about Ryan Jensen. So yeah. Ryan Jensen has yet to compete in any real team drill, any 11-on-11s this whole training camp. So I don't know, man. Playing. I don't know. He's definitely not playing week 1. That's my I'm not shocked if he, doesn't play many games at all, if any this year, but I feel very, very confident in saying he will not be ready to go in week 1 against the Vikings. With that being said, thank you guys for tuning in. As always, we will catch you guys next week, and I'll leave the feedback down below. Give us a thumbs up, a 5-star review. We do appreciate it.